So I was speaking with someone this week. You know, it was a sunny day here in Kansas City, and so there were a lot of motorcycles out. Yeah, you may have ridden by some or even driven one. And so one of my motorcycle buddies and I were having a conversation, and I was actually sharing about how I've always, since I was a little girl, wanted a motorcycle. When I was little and I would play with my sisters, we would have Saturday morning doll time. And when we had Saturday morning doll time, we had a long couch, and that was the van. You know, you pull out the sofa seats and you put them on the side, and you get inside, and that's the van. And then the love seat was the car, and you put the pillows on the outside and sit in there and you get the car. And I was the youngest of three girls, so my sister got the van, the oldest sister. She got the van, and you could fit a lot of babies in that van. And then the other sister got the car. Very cool, you know, you could fit a few in the back seat. And they decided, you know, that these two vehicles had cruise control. So on a Saturday morning, you know, and you're there kind of all day hanging out in the living room, you know, they could set it on cruise control. And at the time, you know, they were really inventing what we have now, just starting those drive-it-yourself cars, you know, because they would just get up and leave. They'd be like, it's on cruise control, so we can go hang out. Now, there wasn't another couch in the house, so they would pull out for the littlest sister the piano bench. And they would go, you got the coolest thing. You have the motorcycle. But the thing about the motorcycle was you can't really fit, I don't know if you could fit any babies. If you can, it might not be safe to have a baby on them. You couldn't really have the babies so much. I still did, you know, wrapped them up back there. But on the motorcycle, you had to stay there all day. You know, because it doesn't have cruise control. That would be dangerous. So they masterfully figured out a way to keep their sister in the living room while they hung out on Saturday mornings. But I was telling my friend how ever since then, I've always wanted a motorcycle. I've always thought it was really cool. And I was mentioning how when I was on the road, I stopped in Indiana to try to get my motorcycle driver's license. And, you know, when I did, I actually failed it. I studied, so I had all the technical questions, right? But because I had never actually been on a motorcycle and ridden one, I failed all the questions, like where's the clutch, where's this or that. You know, I looked at the picture and I was like, God knows where any of this stuff is. And so I studied again. I stayed overnight, camped out, and then went in the next morning to try to pass it, and again didn't pass it. But anyway, long story short, I was explaining to him how my love for motorcycles, and he, you know, was inquiring about that. And I said, well, but you know, what I do is I always pray about it before I, you know, really think of doing it. And every time I have, I've gotten, you know, a story, you know, that to me has been guidance. Okay, don't do that right now. It's not time for a motorcycle. And at this point, I think I'm a little older, and I'd rather get on the motorcycles of my friends who have been riding for 8 million years, right? I'd rather be in their safe care. So anyway, in this conversation, he brought up an accident that he had been in. And he was up in either North or South Dakota, driving along, and got to a light. At that light, he had a green arrow. So he turned at the light, at that green arrow. Well, across from him, the car coming straight at him came right at him and T-boned him. And he went flying off the motorcycle, spinning through the air. Now, right after that accident, the police come and everyone's there. And what starts to unfold is that he's describing his green arrow, and the other driver, the person that was driving the car, said, no, they had a green light. And they just went forward. Now, you have two different stories, right? And could you imagine the frustration and the anger that would start coming up when you know you had a green light and someone hit you, and you're certain they ran a red light. But they're standing there with the authorities, and they're letting them know, no, that's not true. Imagine what that would bring up in you, right? They can't both be right. Well, as it turns out, the police officers that arrived on the scenes listened to the gentleman, who I think were still being gentlemen at the time, and they each go to one side of the light to where the parties were coming from. And one police officer says to the other one, when they see the lights change, they say, green, green arrow. Green, light, green arrow. So the car itself had a green light. The motorcycle turning had a green arrow. They were both right. No one was wrong. Can we make space in our minds and in our worlds for having multiple things be right? Is that a possibility? Is it possible that so many of our conflicts on this planet, especially when it comes to God and when it comes to religion, is that we say the one that works for me needs to work for you? The way that I see it is how you need to see it. What I get to experience is what you need to experience. And my version of spirituality, my version of practice, my version of God, my version of this universe, heaven, hell, whatever you want to call it, needs to be yours because I'm right. Is it possible that when it comes to God and when it comes to spiritual practices, there are multiple green lights? There are multiple green lights all leading to the same destination. Because, religion, and if we use our thinking minds, we're all aware that religion was, in its early days, part of governance, right? It was part of control. It was part of governing. It was part of probably receiving some money. It was part of a system that would get people to behave the way they want to have them behave. But spirituality is something different. Spirituality is about empowerment. Spirituality is about freedom. Spirituality is about emancipation. It's about awakening. It's about coming alive. And that's an entirely different thing. Now, you can have them both together in the same space, no? And in fact, if we really use our spiritual maturity, we can recognize that in any religion, we can have awakening. And in any religion, we can have a sort of fundamentalism that shuts down, that judges, that separates, that makes wrong. So at everything, you have the high and you have the low. At everything, you have the door open and you have the door slammed shut. And there are people in everything that experience it for the purpose of awakening enlightenment. And there are people that use things to separate and to cause suffering. Can we get out of these paradigms and recognize that there is a deeper truth? The green light is where we bless all the paths our feet walk to be free, where we honor all spiritual practices that lead to enlightenment, that we can have the space in our consciousness for recognizing that for myself as an individual with my own mind, my own set of worldviews, my own experience, my own birth patterns of how I've come here, I could not possibly know the fullness of what is right for you, what your green light is, or how you will reach your awakening. I could not possibly know that for you. But what, especially if we're immersed in unity, we can know is that God is everywhere present. There is nowhere God is not. That God is, as we sing, in every mountain, in every sunset, in every being, in every part of life. And that, in fact, there is a metaphysical scripture written upon everything, written on the very environment. It wouldn't matter where you were born or what books were held in your hand or what prophets or what sages or what saints you were told about or taught about. It wouldn't matter if you tuned into your heart and you truly listened. Because the truth is, the divine design is written upon our hearts. And when we lead with our hearts, not our heads, we become awake and we become aware. And when that happens, we become more compassionate, we become more understanding. There's something that was circulating online the last few weeks in light of the recent tragedies. And it was a very well-intending letter from a teacher about the Florida experience. And in this letter, the teacher writes about the comprehensive things that cause suffering and that can cause these difficulties that lead to these tragedies. and things that many of us are very aware of, like mental health support and structures that support. But in that letter, this woman is talking about how she was raised. And she was raised by a military family, by a military father. And she was taught that, she had these specific rules. And she was taught nothing in her room is her own, that they can come in at any time, they can read anything, they can look at anything. And there was structure and there was system. And in that, there was a tone. In that, there was an air and a feeling that the message that was getting across in a time of need for compassion was, if they did it my way, or the way my parents did it, this wouldn't have happened. How often do we hear that? If they loved my way, if they loved the gender that I love, if they loved the religion that I loved, if they lived in the home that I lived in, if they had all of the circumstances that I had that formed me, in fact, if they were the very soul that I was, they would turn out exactly like me. There's a danger in that, isn't there? And we can do that even when we don't intend to do that. We can have a consciousness that inadvertently, when we step into the mind instead of into the heart, can shut down rather than build bridges, can put up walls and separate, and come from a place where we think we know. But can we have the spiritual maturity to trust that there is a power and a life force, a light, a love that binds us all and that guides us all and that is everywhere present? And can we use our spiritual practice to trust that and to activate it and to call it forth? To really look at someone wherever they are on their path and say, I know you'll be guided. And to trust that people need different things. The title of this talk today is a little risky or a little sketchy. It's called Give 'Em Hell. In Unity, if you've been in the Unity practice enough, you know that we don't teach that God is a being or a man. We don't anthropomorphize God. In Unity, we accept that we all have our own words and concepts, definitions for God. We call God energy, we call God love, we call God life. We say that it's the unnamed and the unnameable that powers us, that birthed us. It is the divine blueprint of this universe. But we don't tell people what to call it. There's some people that may call God Father. There's some people that may just leave it unnamed. We don't teach that heaven and hell are places you go to at the end of life. We teach that all of life is consciousness, and you can create a heaven or a hell right here if you want one. We teach universal principles, and that by applying these principles to whatever our religious framework is, we can come alive and we can awaken. But the title of this talk, Give 'Em Hell, refers to a blind spot we might have in Unity and that the world tends to have. It's part of the human condition. And that blind spot comes into play when we think our way is better. Even if we have an idea our way is more inclusive, our way is more loving, our way is more open, if we for a moment think that our way is the way that everyone should have, there's a naivety in that. Give 'em hell refers to the idea that if someone is not harming another person, and the concept of hell is in their spiritual practice, the concept of a devil, which is not in Unity, the concept of a devil or hell or all these states of punishment could possibly, surprisingly, to some of us, be what is needed for someone to step into their light being. To step into their God life or their good life. When we look at the history of religion as governance, we can recognize that even on an individual level, spirituality or religion can be a bring a sense of self-governance. It can be our way to regulate ourselves, and some people need to have a dominant outside authority that they are going to get in trouble with, an idea that they are going to burn in hell, or that a devil's going to be out to get them in order to not abuse another, in order to enter into recovery from what is tearing up their bodies, their minds, their families, to take the steps to get out of the darkness and step into the light, to actually move forward on the path of being a kinder, more compassionate member of society that contributes. Can we believe in that possibility? Can we believe in the possibility that if you were to take someone that might need that at some particular time in their life, for whatever reason, whatever their framework is, it helps them in that moment to make better choices for their beingness, to have a framework, a worldview, or a thought that's different from our own? Can we open up to that possibility? William James, the philosopher and the one they call the father of psychology, he wrote The Varieties of Religious Experience. He says, a great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. This is a season for nonviolence. It's a season that is marked by the lives of Martin Luther King and Gandhi, and it's a time when we, in our unity practice, take some time to look at the principles of nonviolence, look at non-resistance, look at love, look at what is ours to do, look at our prejudices. Can we look at our judgments? Can we each take a step even deeper into our practice to look and say, what's mine to do? How can I be a more loving and accepting and peaceful person? We had over 100 people at a film we just showed last Sunday, and it was the film White Like Me on white privilege and on racism in our country. And one of the take-homes and the takeaways in our discussion was that when we enter into a state of acceptance and loving kindness with someone, even if we disagree with them, even if we loathe how they're showing up, if we can be the presence of love, that transforms, that heals, that empowers. So can we be with the things we disagree with, but always honor the truth of the being around us or in front of us? Always honor the light. Recognize who we are looking at. Would we be willing to give them hell if it helps someone be a better person? Isn't that truly the purpose of religion, of spirituality? If it helps them walk a step further, if it gets people out of sex trafficking or slavery, drug addiction, abuse, even if it's a belief system that may keep someone in fear for a time being, if it is a step on their path to awakening, it might not be our path. But for some people, if they don't have a line they're afraid to cross, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. When my grandmother went crazy on me because she found out that I was in unity rather than going to the Catholic Church, which my sister thought she was going to, kind of throw her a bone, like, at least someone's going to church out of the three of us. She is. She thought that was going to be good. It sent her into an asthma attack. But it was very easy for me to see. I didn't see her reaction as judgmental, even though she was saying, "Get out! Get out! You're killing me!" I saw it as being, her Catholicism is what she needs. This keeps her alive. And she loves me so much, she is terrified for my life. Terrified even to the point that she would step into, a semi-experience of shaming or disowning me. So from that spiritual awareness, I was able to completely stay in a space where it doesn't change my love for her. It didn't shift it. It was more like I understood it, and even in a quirky, weird, kind of sick way, I could be like, man, she loves me. She's afraid for my eternal well-being. It's good I got someone on my side. The Dalai Lama talks about the religion we're born into. And he has an interesting philosophy on it. He says that you don't need to change the religion you're born into. You can, but you don't need to. He's like, from within anything you are born into, you have the opportunity for awakening. You have the opportunity for being on the path. You have an opportunity to experience the way, the truth, and the light. Through anything. There is so much that I appreciate about different world religions. When I did my hospital internship in ministerial school, I remember talking to a Muslim doctor. And I was fascinated in this conversation. He really wanted to have a conversation with me about what is your practice and what is unity? What was Catholicism to you? And then he shared with me about his spiritual practice and about how much he knows and the importance of knowledge. And I was just fascinated and floored, because one of the things I thought was interesting about Christianity is how so often people don't know a lot of the history. They're surprised by the history when they find out some of the facts or some of the contradictions. And so I valued that. Wow, the dedication and the education that comes with it. In Catholicism, I value the mysticism and the practice of devotional prayer. In traditional Christianity, I value the service, the number of people that have been helped, clothed, fed. In Judaism, the social conscience, the power of that, the standing in it so clearly. In Hinduism, the timeless Trinity, the fact that the spiritual figures are not in human form, so they can't be really argued with. It's Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. They're eternal. We don't have to go, oh, now we found out this didn't really happen, so let's throw all that out. In Buddhism, the practice, the meditation, non-resistance, and mindfulness. There's an opportunity in everything for fundamentalism and for mysticism, for missing the mark and for arriving at a place of peace, compassion, and with our hearts wide open. Everything is imperfect. The moment we put it into a structure, the moment we express it from the mind, the moment we put form around it, the moment we try to create order, everything is imperfect. Even our highest idea, I always say this, I think this so deeply, our highest idea of what God is will always sorely miss the mark. We will always be shy of the truth. Because in my mind, it always has to be much greater than we could even conceive. The Dalai Lama said, "This is my simple religion. There is no need for temples, no need for complicated philosophy. My brain and my heart are temples. The philosophy is kindness. So let us activate, let us celebrate, and let us honor everything that leads to the heart as a temple and kindness as action." Namaste.